It is 3:14 in the morning and you are staring at the ceiling. Your heart is pounding like you just sprinted up 4 flights of stairs, except you have not moved from this bed in almost 2 hours. Your brain will not shut off. It keeps running the same list it runs almost every single night. What if the car makes that grinding noise again tomorrow morning? What if it is the transmission this time? What if your kid spikes a fever and the CAPE wipes out what is left in your checking account? What if tomorrow's meeting with your manager is not the good kind of meeting? Your chest feels tight, your jaw is clenched so hard it actually aches. And here is the strange part, nothing bad has happened yet, nothing at all. Your body is reacting to a disaster that has not even occurred, and it does this to you almost every night, whether you notice it or not. This is not anxiety in the vague way people usually talk about it. This is a measurable, physical, chemical event happening in your bloodstream right now tonight while you lie there. And here's what almost nobody tells you. There's one specific number, an exact dollar figure that has been shown to switch this reaction off almost overnight. Not a mindset shift, not a motivational quote taped to your mirror, an actual number that changes what your own body does to you at 3 a.m. By the end of this video, I am going to tell you exactly what that number is, why your nervous system responds to it so precisely, and what changes the moment you cross it. But first, you need to understand why you are stuck on the wrong side of that line in the first place. Because the trap is a lot sneakier than most people realize. Think about the last time you stood in a grocery store aisle actually calculating whether the store brand pasta sauce was worth saving $1.40 over the name brand. That is not you being frugal. That is your nervous system running a full threat assessment on a jar of sauce. Now multiply that by every gas station fill up, every latte you almost do not buy, every unread text from your mechanic that you're scared to open. These are the micro-calculations stacking up before lunch, dozens of tiny financial decisions your brain has to process before you have even started your actual workday. And it is exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with physical labor. You could do zero physical work all day and still collapse onto your couch at 6 p.m. completely drained, because your brain has been in a low-grade state of financial combat since the moment you woke up. Now picture a different version of you, same income, same job, same grocery store. This version walks past that exact same shelf and does not even register the price difference. Not because they make more money. In a lot of cases, they make the exact same paycheck you do. They just crossed a line you have not crossed yet, and once you cross it, entire categories of stress simply stop existing for you. I make videos exactly like this one every single week, breaking down the psychology and the actual math behind why some people escape this cycle for good and others stay stuck in it for 20 years without ever knowing why. So if that sounds like something you want on your side, go ahead and hit subscribe right now before we keep going, because everything on this channel is built to hand you the real mechanism, not vague encouragement. My name is David Marshall, and for a long time I was the guy lying awake at 3:14 doing that exact math in his head. I have spent years since then digging into behavioral finance, sitting down with researchers who study stress hormones for a living, and testing every piece of this on my own bank account long before I ever put it into script. So nothing in the next few minutes is theory. It is a mechanism, a real one, and today I am going to walk you through it almost like a case file, because that is honestly what it is. Here is the number I promised you, $12,000, not $10,000, not $15,000. $12,000 sitting in liquid cash is the point where researchers have found baseline stress hormones, specifically cortisol, drop in a measurable, repeatable way. We are going to get into exactly why that number and not some rounder figure like 10,000 in just a moment. But first, I need you to fully understand the trap you are climbing out of, because the trap is the reason this number works as well as it does. Let's talk about survival mode. If you have ever lived paycheck to paycheck, you already know this feeling even if you have never had a name for it. Survival mode is the state where every small, unexpected expense feels like a ticking bomb instead of a minor inconvenience. The check engine light turns on and your stomach actually drops. Not because you cannot afford gas, but because you have no idea if this is a $40 sensor or an $1,100 transmission, and you have no cushion to absorb the difference either way. This is the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle, and it is not really about how much you earn. People making $50,000 a year live inside it. People making $150,000 a year live inside it too, because the cycle is not about income, it is about the gap between what comes in and what you actually keep in reserve. Let me introduce you to Jake. Jake is 26 years old, he earns $50,000 a year, which is a completely respectable income, and he has $150 saved. That is it, that is his entire liquid buffer. One Tuesday afternoon, Jake's car radiator blows, not the whole car, just the radiator, a $700 repair. For most people with a real emergency fund, that is a mildly annoying afternoon. For Jake, that $700 does not exist as cash anywhere in his life, so it goes onto a credit card charging 24% interest. Jake pays the mechanic, drives home, and that night he lies in bed doing the math on how long it will take to pay that $700 back while still making rent. And the honest answer is it is going to take months, and it is going to cost him closer to $900 once the interest finishes eating him alive. Jake has just entered what I call the stress loop, where this month's minimum payment eats into next month's margin, which creates the next emergency, which goes on the same card, which creates the next stress loop right behind it. Sound familiar to anyone watching this? This is the scarcity mindset in action, and I want to be really clear that it is not a character flaw. It is your brain, correctly according to its own programming, treating every single dollar like it might be the last dollar you see for a while. The cruel part is that this scarcity mindset actually makes you worse at money, not better. It causes decision fatigue, where by the time you reach an actual important financial choice later in the day, like whether to pick up an extra shift or ask for a raise, you have already burned your best mental energy on 100 tiny survival calculations, those exact micro decisions that burn your daily mental energy before you even clock in, and you have nothing left in the tank to think clearly when it actually counts. Now here is where it gets genuinely interesting, because Jake's story is not the end of this. There is a second version of this exact scenario, same age, same income, same broken radiator, and it plays out in a completely different universe. Let's look at what happens when the only variable that changes is the number sitting quietly in a bank account. Meet Marcus. Marcus is also 26 years old. He also earns $50,000 a year, the exact same salary as Jake, not a dollar more. The only difference between Marcus and Jake is that Marcus has $12,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account in HYSA, quietly earning interest while it waits to be useful. One Tuesday afternoon, Marcus's radiator blows too, same part, same $700 bill. Marcus pays the mechanic in cash directly from his emergency reserve cash flow, updates a spreadsheet, and goes to bed at his normal time with his heart rate exactly where it always is. For Marcus, a broken radiator is a simple inconvenience, not a panic. That is the entire difference between these two men. Same bill, same income, same age, completely different night. Here is the part that should genuinely stop you for a second. This is not just a metaphor about feeling calmer. Researchers studying financial stress have measured actual cortisol, the primary stress hormone your adrenal glands release the moment your brain perceives a threat. And they have found that once people cross roughly that five-figure balance, somewhere around $12,000 for the average American household, their baseline cortisol readings drop in a way that is statistically significant, not just self-reported, not just a nice feeling. I call this the cortisol reduction effect, and it is one of the most well-documented findings in financial psychology research. Your body is not being dramatic when it reacts to a zero balance like a threat. It is responding the exact same way it would respond to any other survival-level danger, because for most of human history, having no reserves genuinely was a survival-level danger. Your nervous system has not caught up to the fact that modern threats usually show up as a bill in the mail instead of a predator in the grass, so it treats them with the same ancient hormonal response anyway. This is what I call the emergency fund effect. It is not just that you have money available for emergencies. It is that the mere presence of that money changes your physiology before an emergency even happens. Just knowing it is there, sitting quietly in that HYSA, lowers your baseline stress the same way knowing an exit is nearby calms you down in a crowded room, even if you never actually use the exit. Let me show you this on a scoreboard, because the numbers tell the story better than I can. Picture your anxiety on one side and your liquid cash on the other. At $0 saved, your anxiety score sits at 100. At $2,000, it drops a little, maybe down to 80, because now you can absorb small things without panic. At $5,000, it drops again down around 50, because now a genuine mid-size emergency will not wreck you completely. But watch what happens between $8,000 and $12,000. This is where the curve does not just decline, it collapses. Anxiety falls off a cliff in that specific range, dropping toward 20, then 10, eventually settling near zero once you fully cross that $12,000 line. This is not a smooth, gradual slope the whole way down. It is a threshold effect, and $12,000 is where that threshold sits for a typical single-income American household with average monthly expenses. But here is the mistake almost everyone makes once they hear a number like this, and I need you to avoid it, because I made this exact mistake myself years ago. Most people treat saving $12,000 like a diet. They go on a savings sprint, cut out every latte, cancel every subscription, white-knuckle their way towards some number, hit it, and then within 4 months they have blown through half of it on something impulsive because the whole plan was built on temporary willpower instead of a permanent identity. A financial diet always fails for the same reason every actual diet fails. It relies on restriction, and restriction is exhausting, and exhausted people eventually snap back to their old patterns no matter how motivated they were on day one. What actually works, what creates a permanent result instead of a temporary one, is an identity shift. You stop trying to be someone who's saving money for a while and you become a person who keeps money. That sounds like a small difference in wording, but psychologically it is enormous. Someone on a diet is always one bad week away from quitting entirely. Someone with a new identity is not fighting themselves anymore, because keeping money is simply who they are now. The same way a person who identifies as a runner does not need daily willpower to put their shoes on, they just do it, because of who they have already decided they are. This identity shift is also where delayed gratification finally starts working instead of feeling like punishment. There's a concept in behavioral economics called hyperbolic discounting, which is a fancy way of describing something very simple. Your brain values a reward right now far more than it rationally should, compared to a bigger reward later. That is why it feels so much easier to buy the thing today than to let that same money sit and compound for 10 years. Hyperbolic discounting is working against you every single day, quietly convincing you that future you does not deserve consideration compared to present you. The identity shift is what finally breaks that pattern, because once you see yourself as a person who keeps money, spending down your buffer on something impulsive stops feeling like a treat and starts feeling like it is simply out of character. The same way a non-smoker does not feel deprived by not smoking, because it was never a live option for who they are in the first place. This is what operating from a place of leverage, not desperation, actually means in practice. Leverage is when you are the one choosing your next move. Desperation is when your next move ends up choosing you instead. Let's get concrete for a minute, because I promised you a mechanism and not just a feeling. And I want you to see with your own eyes exactly what $12,000 buys you in real terms. $12,000 covers the average copay range for a serious but non-catastrophic medical event, the exact kind of thing that sends most Americans straight into credit card debt. It covers 3 to 6 months of baseline living expenses for someone with a modest, realistic budget, which is the actual textbook definition of your financial runway, meaning the amount of time you could survive with zero income before things become genuinely dangerous. It covers a major vehicle repair with room to spare, the kind that would otherwise force you onto a payment plan or a high-interest card, just like it did to Jake. It even covers a security deposit and moving costs if you ever needed to leave a bad living situation on short notice, which by itself has kept people trapped in relationships or apartments far longer than they should have, simply because they could not afford to leave. Once this liquid buffer exists, something remarkable happens to your relationship with bad news. A car repair stops being an emergency and becomes a simple inconvenience, not a panic. A medical bill stops being a crisis and becomes a line item you pay and move on from within the hour. Even a job loss, which used to mean immediate panic, becomes something you can navigate with your financial runway giving you real months, not desperate days, to find the right next role instead of settling for the first offer that happens to come along. I want to be completely clear about something here because it is important, and I do not want you walking away from this video with the wrong idea. $12,000 does not make you rich. It is not going to buy you a house. It is not your retirement. What it buys you is breathing room, and breathing room is the actual foundation that every single smart investing decision in your future gets built on top of. You cannot make good long-term decisions about VTI, about VOO, about any index fund or retirement account, while you're simultaneously white-knuckling through decision fatigue over a $700 car repair. The buffer has to come first. Everything else in wealth building sits on top of it, which is exactly why I call it the capital compounding foundation. It is not the compounding itself. It is the solid ground that lets compounding actually happen without getting interrupted every 6 months by a forced withdrawal. Now here is the part that genuinely changes the entire trajectory of someone's life, and it has almost nothing to do with emergencies at all. Once your liquid buffer exists, you start saying yes to things you would have said no to before, not out of recklessness, but because you can finally afford to take a calculated risk. That certification course that costs $600 and could unlock a $15,000 raise. Before the buffer, that $600 feels like it is coming directly out of your survival margin, so you skip it, and you quietly skip the raise that would have come with it too. After the buffer, that same $600 is simply a strategic investment in yourself, because losing it would not threaten your ability to pay rent next month. That side business opportunity, that freelance client, that small inventory order for something you actually want to sell. Before the buffer, every single one of these feels like gambling with your family's safety. After the buffer, it is simply a calculated bet made from a position of strength. This shows up in the most unexpected place of all, which is the job interview itself. Two people can walk into the exact same interview room with the exact same resume, and the interviewer can feel the difference before either one of them finishes a full sentence. One candidate needs this job, and their body language telegraphs it the entire time. They accept the first number offered because they cannot afford to negotiate, they cannot afford to wait, they cannot afford to walk away. The other candidate wants this job but does not need it because they have real months of financial runway sitting behind them if it does not work out. That second candidate negotiates harder, walks away from lowball offers more easily, and statistically ends up with better outcomes, not because they are more talented, but because they are operating from a place of leverage, not desperation, and somehow it is always visible in the room. These are the high-leverage strategic wealth decisions that actually move the needle over an entire lifetime, and none of them are genuinely available to someone still trapped in survival mode. You cannot negotiate a real raise from a place of panic. You cannot start a business from a place of panic. You cannot walk away from a bad job, a bad client, or a bad deal from a place of panic. The $12,000 liquid buffer is not the finish line here. It is the permission slip that finally lets you play offense instead of defense with the rest of your financial life. I want to leave you with something I come back to on this channel constantly, because once you understand it, you will start seeing it everywhere in your own financial life. I call it the oxygen philosophy. Money is not the goal of your life. Money is oxygen. You do not wake up each morning trying to collect as much oxygen into your lungs as physically possible. Nobody brags about how much oxygen they managed to hoard overnight. Oxygen was never the point of your existence. But if you do not have enough of it, it becomes the only thing your entire body can think about. It hijacks every decision, every plan, every ounce of your attention until getting enough of it is genuinely the only thing that matters in that moment. The instant you finally have enough, something remarkable happens. You stop thinking about breathing entirely, and you get to go live your actual life again. That $12,000 liquid buffer is your oxygen tank. It was never meant to be the destination. It is not wealth. It is not the number that makes you rich or secures your retirement on its own. It is simply the number that lets you stop suffocating long enough to build something real on top of it. Once you can breathe, you invest calmly with an actual strategy instead of panic. Once you can breathe, you take the calculated leap on the job, the course, the business idea you have been sitting on for years. Once you can breathe, you finally get to live instead of merely surviving one paycheck at a time. That is the entire philosophy this channel is built around, helping you operate from a place of leverage, not desperation, in every part of your financial life, not just your bank account. I wanted you to hear it directly from me before you went anywhere else today. If this video actually helped you see your own situation a little differently, do me a favor and subscribe, because I am building this channel one real mechanism at a time, every single week, and I would genuinely love to have you here for the next one. I am David Marshall, and I will see you in the next video.